I'm hoping to get you excited about a book that is, maybe except for its home country, which is Germany, not that widely read in the rest of the world. And I don't know why, because I think it certainly deserves it. Welcome to the new episode of Lesson on Classics, and today we are talking about Effi, Briest by Theodor Fontane. This is a book I finished just last night, and since I finished it, it has been haunting me. First, let me just say that I'm not an academic. I read books for pure enjoyment, and my approach is never to do research before reading the book. I will do it sometimes after reading the book, it depends on the book, but I believe that a book, especially with classics, should stand on its own. And Effi, Briest is definitely one of those books that you can just pick up and start reading without knowing too much about it. In fact, I would say if you have the same Penguin edition that I'm holding in my hands, do not, under any circumstances, read the introduction to the book, which is at the beginning of the book. I have a bone to pick with Penguin, especially when it comes to this book, because the introduction to the book includes so many spoilers, which, if you know the book, you know that the author was trying to leave for the readers to work out for themselves. And so I do believe that reading an introduction before getting into the novel will spoil the experience for you. So you can just blindly go into the story. I promise you, you'll be fine. And so in this episode, I am not going to be talking too much about a plot because I don't want to include too many spoilers, but I will describe the setting for you and give you a little bit of background so you can decide whether this novel is something that you would like to read. So, this book is set in the last quarter of the 19th century, and we are in Germany, which at that time was the Kingdom of Prussia. Believe it or not, this tiny, well, relatively tiny, 220 pages with a very tiny print book spans 9 years as we follow the life of Effi Briest. We meet her at the age of 17. She is part of the Prussian aristocracy, and so she is this carefree, nature loving, very much child at heart type of girl. You know, she likes to run around the meadows, she likes to hang around and play with her friends, she likes to play on swings, but her life takes a turn, and all this, by the way, happens in the first 10-20 pages of the book. She receives a marriage proposal from a gentleman called Fontane. Now, there's a bit of a weird thing because Fontane was actually in love with Effi's mother some years back. He couldn't marry her because his position and his fans wouldn't allow Effi's mother to accept his proposal at the time. He is a civil servant, by the way. But some years later, he's progressed, he is a very ambitious man, and so Effi accepts his proposal. And so again, I don't want to say too much, but for the next 9 years, we follow Effi's life as she tries to navigate various challenges of the married life, and as she tries to navigate adulthood and responsibilities, and really the world that she is not quite ready for. And by the way, one important thing that I've missed is that Baron Fontane is actually 21 years older than Effi, which you may have guessed, because obviously if he proposed to Effi's mother some years earlier, we knew that he would be an older gentleman. And I think that's all I'm going to tell you about the plot, because I don't want to give away too much. Most of the fun you will have with reading this novel will come from not knowing anything about it. So I can't stress enough, please don't do any research, don't read anything about this novel in advance of actually reading the novel. The only thing I guess I could add, that this is definitely a tragic novel. And despite the plot being actually quite straightforward, there is so much to unpack in this novel. It's insane. As with a lot of classic books, really the story of marriage here is just a form of a gateway to deeper themes of morality, of society, and the truth about human condition. So this is definitely a form of a social study if you wanted to analyze it like this. This is in a way discourse on education and culture versus nature, old world and new world. And actually we have some elements of what we, I guess today, would call gaslighting, and how experience and education is used for the purpose of gaslighting. We have some elements of ghost story as well. There's so some gothic elements in the book. We have some fantastic descriptions of the locations, and actually setting plays a key role in this book. The first half of the book happens in this small seaside town where actually nothing happens. And I had to look it up on the map because I couldn't understand why they kept taking a ferry to go from that German town to Berlin. And of course, everything became clear because even though it was a fictional town called Kessing, it was loosely based on a real town which is now part of Poland called Świnoujście. We need to remember that, of course, when Prussia existed, that was consisting partly of Poland, because Poland for 100 years was taken apart by Austria, Russia, and Germany. So Świnoujście, at the time when the book was set, was part of Prussia. It went back to Poland after WW1 ended. So that's the first half of the book. The second half of the book happens in Berlin. What else we've got here in this book? We also have political backdrop because, you know, we're only 30 or so years away from WW1. And also we have sometimes very brutal family relationships. I already mentioned this weird situation where Effi's husband was once interested in Effi's mother. But there are also other things happening as well, and you will see this in the second half of the book, how Effi's family need to make certain decisions and what their decision-making process is. There are probably countless essays on symbolism in this book. I'm going to leave that to professional critics. I loved this book for two key reasons, and these two things really stood out for me. One was the complexity of the characters. Not one character in this book is simply black and white. They are deeply, deeply complex, and just when you think you've made up your mind about one of the characters, something happens, or you suddenly are being let into their head and you get to know their thoughts. And so Fontane has this way of shifting your perspective and forcing you to reconsider your own opinion. You don't also get any clear-cut villains in this book. If anything, you see people who are in different ways all some kind of victims. And the other thing that stood out to me in this book, which I have never experienced actually, or at least I can't recollect right now in any other novel, is that the narrator in this novel doesn't spell everything out for a reader. So you get this rich detail in descriptions and in settings, but actually some of the very key events in this book are not spelled out. They are happening off page and only become clear to the reader later. In fact, it's not just the events, it's also what the characters feel and think. So you kind of go through the book, you read it, you follow the story, and then towards the end of the book you find out something that actually happened earlier in the story, but you just found out about it. And instead of feeling frustrated by this approach, I actually felt very much respected as a reader. It's almost as if I, as a reader, was left with the task of piecing together a puzzle. And that would be done in a way that my imagination would allow me to do it. It's almost as if Fontane is saying to the reader, hey, you've got this. I trust you. You can do this. You can pull this together better than I would put it in words. I really love this approach, and for this reason I'm so insistent on not giving away too much detail about the book, because I think this will all be lost if you know too much about the plot. One other thing I need to say about this book is that this book does require some patience, I think, especially in the first half of the book, but if you can get through it, I promise you, you will devour the second half. And the reasons why you might struggle with the first half is not because it's a difficult read, not at all. It's just that the plot seems slightly stagnated. But as you finish the book, you will understand that everything in this book, including everything in the first half, had to be there, and it had a part to play. Certain dialogues, certain conversations, certain fables, they all come together at the end. Finally, I so want to see the adaptation of this book, the most recent one from 2009 with Sebastian Koch. If you recognize the name, that's because he was in the movie The Lives of Others. Fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. Also, he has been in some Hollywood movies as well. He's a German actor, but very well known, and he is absolutely great. Unfortunately, I cannot find a version of this movie that I can watch with English subtitles, except on DVD, and I don't have a DVD player. So if you can tell me where I can watch this movie, please let me know, because the trailer looks stunning. So there you go, Theodor Fontane and his Effi, Briest. Absolutely worth reading. Let me know if you've read it and what you thought about it. Also, let me know what other classics you have read and maybe you would like me to talk about in these mini series, and I'll see you in my next episode.